Countries like Burundi, South Sudan, and the Central African Republic had the highest poverty rates in 2020, with over 70% of populations living below the poverty line. So to the question, how do you build, a startup in a poverty-stricken continent? Could the solution be to not build for the poverty-stricken continent, but to build for the affluent continent?
Building out of Africa as a founder, every day is a challenge. How do you find the balance between, yes, serve the affluent guys, get the money, but have an impact as socially driven arm of the business? For example, think about like Uber and InDrive. It's the same principle. You're collecting money from those who can afford to use those cars, but you are taking care of drivers. And then second thing was, I was now having conversations. Okay, maybe I should find a way to, because I'm learning about venture capital funding. I'm like, okay, let me raise funding. So I start talking to people. I start with those who say they invest in black founders. So I go pitch my startup and you're like, where do you say your company is at again? I said Nigeria. I said, it's a nice idea, but we don't know what goes on in that country, when we may have to turn this down. That mindset of chasing money, of building unprofitable system is not contextual. You can't do that in Africa because we don't have that amount of money that can be spent for a long time on a project that is unprofitable.
What is some of your biggest lessons you've learned just by mentoring other founders?
Remove pride, remove ego.
As a founder.
What
does entrepreneurship? Let's even start with setting out the foundation. And how does it look like? What are the problems you expect to have or to face?
What are the problems you expect to face as a founder? A lot of problems.
Hello, Cynthia.
Hello.
Thank you for taking out the time. So, Cynthia here, you are known as an ecosystem builder. I think the word that we use to encapsulate everything is you're an enabler. The primary at SDC Startup School. And for most of your life, it's all has been about startup and providing resources and support to founders to start and start the right way and then grow. And it's good to have you on the podcast.
Thank you.
Today, we are going to dissect and break down one of your articles. This conversation, right? I wanted to how do we start about this conversation? This conversation is very, very dear to me because we're in Africa. And let's look at some facts that you itemized in your article, and then we can give context to it. Rural regions are home to approximately 60% of Africans living in extreme poverty, as estimated by the World Bank. In 2020, Sub-Saharan Africa had a poverty rate of over 40%, with individuals living on less than $1.90 per day, according to the World Bank. Africa has the highest number of individuals living in extreme poverty, with approximately 428 million people facing this hardship, according to the United Nations Development Programme. You still went on. Countries like Burundi, South Sudan, and the Central African Republic had the highest poverty rates in 2020, with over 70% of populations living below the poverty line. The informal sector employs a staggering 85% of workers in Sub-Saharan Africa, leaving them more susceptible to poverty and limited economic opportunities, according to International Labour Organization. This is a lot of numbers to set the foundation for your question. How to build a startup in a poverty-stricken continent. And the word poverty-stricken just stands out that is a lot. I would can't you use another word instead of using poverty-stricken? And this is a very important question. But before we get into that, let's go back. Let's meet Cynthia Chisom. Quick intro.
So my name is, for context, I am praised, we're close. So having this formal interaction can be quite interesting. But my name is Cynthia Chisom, and across everything that you see me do on the internet, in person, it's really centered around how can we have more companies being built out of the continent, simply because the more companies we have, the more impact we can create, the more jobs we can create, the more economic growth we can see and experience on the continent. So you will find this being expressed either through me as an enabler across cities, or through SDC, through startup education, or through the Aboki, which is where I'm actually applying some of the principles that I teach in real life to just show that it's possible to build companies that are impact focused. So yeah, that's me in a summary.
It's more like when you were in school, right? You all know that you went straight into like entrepreneurship engagement, like startup engagement. What out of all the options of things you could do when you were in university, why did you choose to go in that direction?
So for me, it wasn't really a predetermined choice. Very early on, when I remember growing up, I wanted to be a scientist. I built rice counter in my head. I built a machine that could power a car with just water as a source of fuel in my head. So my parents created an environment where I could sort of bring up new ideas, and it was always scientific. Then later on, I found my passion for football. So
Oh, really?
Yeah. Found a
Okay.
passion for football. I played consistently for years, from secondary school all the way to
We
university.
need pictures to prove that.
I wish that was the age of Instagram, but you can't really.
Nah, we need pictures to prove that.
So I was so into football that I built my future around the idea of me becoming a footballer full time. I was going to play for the under-17 female team, the Falcons, right, at that time. But my parents said, no, you're not going to go that route, because we know that if something happens to your leg for any reason, there's nothing for you to fall back to.
True.
So you have to go to university. If you still have the passion, then we'll support you. So I went to uni, and I was still playing for the school and on the side. But then along the line, I would say I just got exposed. The university environment exposed me to a world beyond what I was very familiar with. I participated in things like Google competitions. There were a couple of side clubs and activities on campus that just made me realize that, okay, football is not the only thing that I derive pleasure from. And I also remember when I was being interviewed for my post-UME, and they said, okay, why do you want to study mechanical engineering? I told them because I want to build flying cars.
That's what you studied?
Yeah. No. I'm getting there.
Okay.
So when I was studying mechanical engineering, they said, I said because I want to build flying cars. Still the desire in me to build stuff.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I was given building technology. Fortunately and unfortunately, but fortunately, I got building engineering, and I
Building
studied
tech.
building engineering. 5 years.
So it's different from building tech.
People call it building tech, but I call it building engineering because 5 years is not beans. But anyway, it was called building tech, but I call it building engineering. So I by the time I was doing that course of study and just getting immersed into the environment, I just realized there's more. And then a particular day, one day, everything changed. I was going to see someone at their hall, and I just noticed this disagreement between an artisan and a female student about like her shoe. Like she gave the guy a shoe, but he hasn't fixed it, and the guy was just very nonchalant in his approach. And I was just like, what's in this shoe repair of everything? So I went online and I started searching. Okay, shoe repair. Wow. So there are companies in the US over 100 years. They're fixing shoes. I watched videos. I was just drawn and attracted to the entire craftsmanship. And I called my parents and said, I'm not coming back home this holiday. I'm going to Onitsha and to learn how to fix shoes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And that was my journey into the world of building a company from scratch. And that entire process of me having to build that company just really showed me the challenges that founders experience. And the more, breakthroughs I was experiencing, I wanted to hand over that knowledge to the nearest founder that I could find. And that's how my life has sort of shaped into what it is today.
Let's talk about your master's a little bit, because there are pictures online of you fixing shoes in London.
Yes.
Right. And what was your focus then? Was it like international and study international business studies or something like that?
So I still remember where I was at that time when I was making a decision to go for masters. Going to the school that I went to for my undergrad, you are taught and you are trained to really believe in the country, and it's good, right? But I believed it so much that I said I don't want to go abroad to do studies. I'd rather go to like a university in Nigeria. I wanted to really just sort of immerse myself. So I actually started an MBA degree, executive MBA at Nile University, right? When I wanted to further my studies. At this time, I was building the Aboki full-time. I'd resigned from my job, doing the Aboki full-time and doing this MBA degree. But I remember how low I felt that period, because now at this time I'm building the company. I'm also advising a couple of other companies. I'm getting paid advising them. I'm supporting them. But I just realized that I had reached this plateau in the knowledge that I had. And I wasn't able to pour into them as much as I desired to. And it was weighing on me so much. The MBA was great. I got to learn a few things, but it didn't have as much depth as I desired. So I said, you know what? Let me just go online. And so I went online and I found Imperial College London Business School. And I just loved the Masters in Entrepreneurship, Innovation and Management.
Oh, nice.
And that was it. I didn't apply to any other school. I just applied to that school because I checked every other university and their degree. Nothing came close to the curriculum of what Imperial was promising me. So I applied for it and I went to the UK. But my decision, when I was planning my trip, was I'm going to the UK to acquire more knowledge on how to build my company better, and see, how I can convert that into like other smaller companies as well. But I'm also going there to hone my skills in this leather craftsmanship that I acquired because the people that I looked up to were over there. Yeah. So I was going to go there, get mentored by them, work with them, So that was my plan. Get more knowledge on building a better company, right? Because I was so immersed into the Abuki, I wasn't seeing the vision. Like I was just in a very murky place, right, mentally, and I knew that was affecting the growth of the company. So I was going go get more knowledge and go get into those workstations and build my skills, and that's what I did.
That is interesting. That's a full circle moment. And then you came back to Nigeria. You said, "Hey, let me start SDC Startup School. Let me start."
I wish it was like that. So when I was on campus, right, in London, it was such an eye-opening experience. How there was so many resources and support for anybody who had an idea. Something as simple as you can book a 30-minute session called like idea surgery, and they match you up with someone, and you can tell all the ideas, like all the ideas that you have, and it could help you sort of see if it's working, if it's not work. We had, Friday pitch nights, every Friday with pizza, that kind of place. And then you also have sessions with like founders, and you come out of London because my campus was in South Kensington. You come out, like so many events in London, startup events you could attend.
So we're like immersed in
I was immersed in the entire space, right? I was like, we don't have this. I'm struggling over here in, building my own company I think I just maybe had one grant to my name at that time, but the knowledge I needed to build the company, I didn't have it. But I came in here, and in less than 2-3 weeks, I'm exposed to so much. So the lack of startup support, the massive difference, it struck me. And then second thing was, I was now having conversations, okay, maybe I should find a way to, because I'm learning about venture capital funding. I'm like, okay, let me raise funding. So I start talking to people. I start with those who say they invest in Black founders. So I go pitch my startup, and you're like, where do you say your company is at again? I said, Nigeria. Said, it's a nice idea, but we don't know what goes on in that country, when we may have to turn this down. But I know you're Black, but you're from Nigeria, so no. I talked to like impact based, and they're like, there's not enough data for us to say we should, invest in Nigeria. So I'm saying, okay, there's a lot of support here, but there's nobody paying attention to Africa. So those are the things that just struck me amongst, different support and resources I got access to. It's just the fact that even though I'm saying there's so much startup support, these people may not be willing to come over. So coming back to Nigeria, getting renewed vision for the company. We've already expanded at this time because I was running the company while I was doing my master's. So already expanding. That burden was still there. So the first expression for that burden was start writing stories
of founders,
of companies. Yes.
Because that is a very interesting perspective, because it's the exact same thing or similar story. The likes of mentioned, like, there was no one writing the stories of founders in Africa, and the question of, I want to raise funding, but I don't know what's going on in your country. And he started writing for, I think, tech Crunch, and that exposed what was going on. And that brings us to like the fact that anyone in the media space right now, like Tech Cabal and the rest, are doing a massively good job just putting Nigerian startups on the map.
Absolutely.
And so from writing stories, you decided that it's time to build communities and provide education and stuff like that.
So from writing, I wasn't even writing stories about African companies. I was writing stories about successful, because I love stories. I'm a podcast person. I read stories for days. So I was writing stories about successful companies and drawing insights and sharing it with people. So as I was doing that, every month, every 2 weeks, I'm writing these stories.
Your audience were founders?
They were founders, and people, I was getting DMs, I can relate to this challenge and all that. And then someone said, can we turn this into a podcast? So the next year, in 2021 or so, I turned it into a podcast. So instead of me writing those stories, I'm saying those stories over my phone.
Wow.
I'm just recording it on Anchor, and it was reaching people everywhere. Like when I'm strangest countries I've never heard of being to before, people were listening to the podcast. But then along the way, I just realized how, even though these stories were great and they had great insights, they were stories. They could only inspire, but they didn't have practical tools, steps. Like, how do I implement all these things I'm hearing? Yeah, I'm inspired by them, but I need to apply. This is my specific challenge. So I'll be getting DMs of founders saying, this is my specific challenge. I have to be holding sessions with them. I said, you know what? Let me start a 6-week program where I'll just spend time with a couple founders and teach them how to build. Because I am also a builder. I have a company. So I had insights, my education, my experience, my exposure. I was able to build out a curriculum. And that was the beginning of what SDC is today, startup education.
That brings us back to how we started building a startup in a poverty-stricken country. The first question will now be, how does one do that? Well, that's a broad question.
That's a very
So what would an entrepreneur look like? What does entrepreneurship like? Let's even start with setting out the foundation. How does it look like for when the odds are like stacked up against you? How does it look? What are the problems you expect to have or to face?
What are the problems you expect to face as a founder? A lot of problems.
Especially I was listening to a conversation by the founder of Cheaper Cash, and he said something. He said, you have to build all your infrastructure. And someone on Twitter said, oh, that's your own problem. We don't even have what to start with at this point. You've started, now you are thinking about, we need to build infrastructure. We need to be like rails that their payments can roll on. But let's start with setting that foundation. How does it look like?
I was having a conversation with one of our advisors and investors at the company. The good thing is that he's also a founder, so it was very easy. And I asked him a question, does it get any better? Does it get any easier? Because, he said, I asked him, it appears that the same problems I was experiencing last year, 2 years ago, from an operational perspective, I'm still experiencing it today. Like, am I the problem? Right? And then he says, no, that absolutely normal that as you grow in the company, you hit certain will I say ceilings, and then you break through it. But that process of breaking through it exposes you to another set of problems that you have to resolve. And then you enter into this new phase, which is a different set of, problems that you're experiencing. And then, so like you're solving problems, you're growing, but you're facing challenges. You're scaling, but you're facing challenges. But it now feels like, is it the same set of challenges I'm experiencing since last 2 years? But it's the same, just in a different dimension, just in a larger scale. Do you get what I mean? So if it's a case of many startups who are trying to build in the agricultural space, they're like, oh, I need access to farm produce so I can sell to customers. The first 2 years, they are able to get it. Now they are bigger. Instead of doing 20 bags of tomatoes, now they're doing 500,000 bags of tomatoes. You're still going to experience the same problem of getting access to tomatoes. You're still going to be looking for farmers who will give you the 500,000, because we are in a continent where certain infrastructure is not available. Certain things that should be easy to get access to isn't there. So you are having to navigate it over and over and over again. And since you can't build roads, you are subject to those issues. When you were doing 20 bags, you experienced bad road, it affected your logistic price. Now you're doing 500,000 bags, you're still experiencing the same bad road, and it's increasing your cost even higher. So like you are navigating the same set of problems, only now you're doing it at a large scale. So building out of Africa as a founder, every day is a challenge. Just being awake every day is a challenge.
You said something here. You said instead of fixating on raising funding, founders should embrace scarcity as an opportunity to generate creative ideas.
Yes.
Build resilience and optimize operational efficiency and team loyalty through bootstrapping. The concept of bootstrapping, right? Or let's also say the concept of fundraising as like right now in the ecosystem has been the main focus of founders, to the point that they for the lack of better word, they over visualize that their goal or the end goal or the sign of success is to raise funds. But here you are suggesting bootstrapping as an alternative.
The thing about fundraising, like when we think about where we got that idea of fundraising the way we are doing fundraising, it came from the West, right? Primarily, venture capital firm. It's a learned principle, right? And if you think about the context of that, how that was applied, it's applied in a country where resource is available. Certain things are already set in place. So if you're giving a founder 500,000, like the challenges that founder would experience to solve a problem with that 500K, like you can see the returns quicker because there are certain things that have been put in place.
Yeah.
Right. So fundraising is different. The fundraising dynamic is different. There's also a lot of funding. I mean, imagine Uber not being profitable for years, even down to IPO, still not being profitable until recently when they started hitting some profitable numbers. Right. It's because there's money to be able to fund that. Because where are you going to get the money to fund an unprofitable large company?
And is that because the most of the bulk of the funding are foreign investment and not local investment?
They're not local investment. So that mindset of chasing money, of building unprofitable system is not contextual. You can't do that in Africa because we don't have that amount of money that can be spent for a long time on a project that is unprofitable. So if you think check it out, the amount of money that is raised in venture capital globally, Africa has less than 1% of that.
Yes, true.
And we are celebrating 4 billion. And yet you want to build a startup like you are in the US, trying to raise money like there's only so much available to you. So from the beginning, you start thinking, I don't have access to so much. How can I build regardless of this?
So there's this conversation that I've kind of enjoyed because I kind of believe that is the solution. So, so we've talked about the problem a lot.
Yes.
Let's talk about the solution
Yes.
now. And as a solution, and I kind of believe it a lot because I consult and I work with a lot of organizations and startups, and I see it being a possibility for Nigerian startups as well. So to the question, how do you build, a startup in a poverty-stricken continent? Could the solution be to not build for the poverty-stricken continent, but to build for the affluent continent?
There are many solutions to a particular problem, as you well know, right? Definitely this route works, which is solving problems for the affluent Africans, right? Because that's where the money is. But it's trying to find a balance between both, right? To say, I don't want to use the example, but I think this is the best way I can describe it, where a company like Tom Shoes will sell shoes to the really wealthy and people that can afford Tom Shoes, and yet they provide a pair of shoes to certain people in certain regions, right? So it's like, how do you find a balance between, yes, serve the affluent guys, get the money, but have an impact and socially driven arm of the business? And let me explain what I mean. In Africa, there are a lot of people in poverty with very little education, little to no education. What are we going to do about that? How can our companies bring these people out of that state? So to be able to do that kind of work, there has to be an impact and a socially driven approach to the entire company's design in the first place. Right? To say that, and that's what we do with. That's what we do. For example, think about like Uber and InDrive. It's the same principle. You're collecting money from those who can afford to use those cars, but you are taking care of drivers, right, to be able to come out of that poverty cycle.
Like in Oluwa Boyji says, do a business that everybody benefits from. The affluent benefits, like
yes.
And then the poor, but not the poor.
The poor benefits,
and then the government also benefits.
Yeah. So don't just think about it in one way, but thinking about it in a multidimensional way. Some of the most successful businesses actually are growing based on that principle, right? Your company has to be impactful, especially if you're building out of Africa. It has to be, because if you decide to isolate yourself from your reality, to come back to haunt you.
So, in a nutshell, find a solution to a problem that benefits everyone involved in the problem. And that is how you can build a sustainable business in a poverty-stricken continent.
Exactly. Child deck, you're making it easy for people to get access to food, but you're empowering the young youth, that young guy, to get a job by making money as a side gig from riding bicycles and cars. Another example is Price Pally. Yes, you're making people get access to food in bulk, but you're empowering farmers. Like, there has to be that balance between the two sides if you want to really build a startup out of the continent, right? There has to be a balance.
And if you don't want to build a balance, just build for someone outside.
Build for someone outside. build for someone outside. Make the money, but if you're thinking about having an effect in a continent like ours, with a drive to really bring us up to a level where we can raise our heads, then we have to think differently as founders.
Very important. Right. You talk a lot about the importance of community-driven entrepreneurship, right? And community-driven entrepreneurship, right, is one of the articles you wrote on your Substack. Why is that model so powerful? We see it happen. We see the effect. So why do you think that community-driven entrepreneurship is a powerful model that ensures that entrepreneurs get access to support, access to education, and access to helping each other?
I remember when I was navigating the early years of my startup, and I had many questions. Many questions. How do I find my co-founder? Do I need a co-founder? What equity should I, use? How do I manage my books? There were just these really huge challenges at that time that I needed to figure out. But I didn't have access to a place, where I can be inspired by other people and get the support I need from other people. I didn't have that. So I was doing it by myself. And it took me years. Now, one day, this is 7-8 years after I built the company to a level, we're doing well in numbers. However, I just noticed that there was this consistent trend in the company, in the business. I wasn't able to afford to pay the local leather artisans that we're supporting. So like when it's time for us to pay out the artisans, it was just difficult to, because I can't find the money again. So I've been wanting, but we don't spend lavish. We have certain percentage that we give to them is a standard and all of that. Now I'm dealing with this conundrum, and I go visit one of my mentors at their office in Abuja, and I'm sitting down with them just talking. I just put it in passing, like, oh, did you guys face this kind of challenge when you guys were growing up? Because they've gone further. How did you figure it out? They say, oh yeah, we just did this and this. I was like, eh? That was all you did. Very simple thing, which was create sub accounts and separate the money. Once the money comes in for the artisans, put it aside. Do you understand what I'm saying? But I was putting everything into one account and spending from that one account. Just that simple insight that he shared. I've never felt peace of mind. The moment I implemented the peace of mind, like no matter what happens, my artisans are getting paid, everybody's getting paid, and there are no issues simply because of
that interaction.
So imagine if I had to go through that, it probably take me a couple years to figure out how to come out of that issue. Meanwhile, somebody else has gone through that issue, came out of it, and just has a simple insight I can take from to apply into mine. Mm-hmm. And in this particular story, I'm being very transparent for context.
Oh,
that was a very deep.
What is your
story.
The biggest lessons? Like, you've mentored a lot of founders, especially with SDC School. What is some of your biggest lessons you've learned just by mentoring other founders?
Remove pride, remove ego.
As a founder.
Even till now. Even with all that we've done as a company at Diaboki, I'm always submitted to my advisors and to my mentors. Always. Everybody knows, oh, Cynthia is this. When I'm in that room with them, I'm a nobody. I'm a junior. I don't know nothing. And because I'm able to submit to their wisdom, I'm able to gain so much. I've been delivered from, I use the word delivered because it's true deliverance. I've been delivered from so many mistakes and issues simply because I listened. So one of the biggest challenges that I've seen, I even had a conversation with the founder. Yes, I'm always having conversations with founders every 2 hours. But the one thing that I've seen across all the founders that I've interacted with is that the more ego the founder has, the easier it is for that person to make a mistake and fail. Because that person is, one, so committed to that solution and not able to see a different way out, right? Because the person is so driven by saying, oh, this solution will work. It has to be this solution.
It's like having this tunnel vision.
Tunnel vision. That's pride. That's ego. Is it that the most likely the founder will start thinking that they know it all. They start thinking that they know it all and they have the perfect vision. If it's not their no. Like, no.
This thing is like more, everything you said right now, sorry for cutting you, it's like, it's more of a behavior of first-time founders. Right. I've had, just like you have conversation with founders, just so that we can list it out. Yeah, the top 5 behaviors of first-time founders.
Absolutely.
Number 1, they want you to sign an NDA is the idea. Right. Number 2, you just don't see it. You just don't get it. You don't see what I see. Right? Number 3, they think your advice is a yes or no situation for them. It's just an advice. The Bible says, out of a multitude of counsel, the truth is established. You don't need me to say the truth. I just share what I know. So you don't have to react to what I said. It is your own decision to take what I said and do whatever you want to do with it. But those are like some of the things I've experienced with first-time founders. But second-time founders, how do you feel? Have you had experience with second-time founders?
They've been burnt, so they know better. They know that they need to prioritize their customers. They know they need to prioritize revenue. However, I've also seen second-time founders that didn't learn the lesson the first time. They probably need another third time experience. Because I've also met someone where they're like, oh, the first one did not work. Maybe I need to. And they do the same thing that they did in the last startup again. And you're seeing the pattern. And you don't even know. Those kind of founders, I don't advise them. Oh. I don't advise founders who have that tunnel vision and they're like, I don't, because anybody who is, so focused on their ways, you can't change the person. Instead, you become the enemy. Do you get? So I'll rather be like, oh, nice, interesting. Just apply, look out for these numbers. Once you see that you're making progress on that, then you know you're fine. I just tell them, okay, I won't advise them. I just say, when you start seeing this number, just know you're successful. Well done. That's it. But if the person is open to saying, okay, I'm thinking about it this way, but I might be wrong. What do you think?
Talking about the poverty situation, from your own personal experience, have you had any experience with startup that have converted like a poverty situation into like innovation and build an innovative business out of it?
Yeah, you're looking at one of them. No, for real. You're looking at one of them. When I decided to build the Aboki, right? The Aboki Shoe Repair, the Aboki Africa. At that time was from an observation on campus. But one thing that changed everything in terms of our approach was when I met Sabo, right? This is like 5-6 years down the line after that encounter that I had with, 2 people on campus. 5 years down the line, I meet Sabo, and Sabo is telling me that the reason why he got into shoe repair was because the insurgency in the north, in Adamawa, they killed his brother. He had to flee. He is the only one that could flee. Left his family in like a place to just hold on until he comes to Abuja and then finds something doing. Then he's able to send money back home and maybe bring them into the city, Abuja in this case. And then he started carrying boxes up and down, making noise for people to, for him to polish shoe. Then after a while, he usually have like a place he would sit at, a Union Bank at that time, and then he'll be polishing shoes. And then somebody just saw him and said, I see that you are very diligent. Let me set up a shop for you. So he sets up the shop. They just had an agreement to just be paying me like 60K every month. While you have freedom, do whatever it is that you want to do, right? But just pay me. I'll take care of the lights. I'll take care of every other thing. Just pay 60K so I can just cover the rent, right, of the place. Just like a good Samaritan, right? I saw how this, for me, the craftsmanship was more of like a delight, and I was just excited about fixing shoes. But then I saw how this thing that is such a delight to me is literally how this guy is putting food on his table, And I just began to see the number and the millions of young people like him who were put in that situation because of just the fact that they were just born into Nigeria and born into certain places, right? And I said, okay, how can I expand the vision beyond just myself? I wanted to build like a fancy place with all the equipment in the world. But now I say, how can I, empower these local leather artisans and then give them access to market, right? So, yeah, you're looking at one of them. But this is just an example of just opportunities, impact-focused business opportunities that exist on the continent that you can only find in Africa. You can't find it in the US because there isn't as much, social deconstruct in the society.
So to say. One thing, the first time when we talked about the Aboki way back, I just remember the guy that used to fix my shoes in area 1, and he was telling me that we just casually talking one day when I went there to pick up the shoes, and he was telling me that he just finished building his house. I was like, God, have mercy, right? And how did you do it? He said, I have clients like you that I've built good relationship with, that you always bring shoes to me. And I have people that I've built good relationship with, number one. Number two, I don't have a house in Abuja. I live in my shop right here. So that way, 99% of all my incomes go back to buy a land in his own state and started building a house. Now he has built a house in his own state, that land he bought, not that the father has land and gave it to him. And that got me, thinking that yes, there's a lot in the informal sector. And the informal sector is still like unorganized. And anyone that looks into the opportunity in the informal sector and say, you know what, if I provide value to this informal sector, I should be able to build a startup in the poverty-stricken continent.
Exactly.
All right, so
that's how Money Point is doing it.
That's how Money Point is doing. Like, let me. Okay, we just have a few more minutes, so let's talk. Let me just say something that really hit me regarding Money Point. Every competition in the market was selling their POS for 120,000 naira. Some that were claiming to be cheaper were like 70,000, 90,000. Now those were banks, and they can come back and pick up the money, the terminal within 2 weeks. Money Point started to give you terminals for 20,000 naira. Now, mind you, if you want to ship the terminal down to Nigeria directly, it's nowhere near 20,000 naira. And that is how they grew their empire, the network, so massively by reducing the barrier to entry and increasing like financial inclusion. That's like perfect example of building a startup in a poverty-stricken economy.
Yes.
We're answering out.
There's so many examples.
Oh, that's beautiful. So what policies or ecosystem support would make the biggest difference, for founders that are just starting out?
Policies and ecosystem support. The first layer of ecosystem support has to be based on ecosystem players realizing that they're actually ecosystem players.
I think we should talk about what are ecosystem players a little bit.
Yeah, so ecosystem players, aka enablers, right? Yeah. These are people who are responsible for the growth of the founder and the startup within that ecosystem, which is usually bound by a region or by a city. So these people include investors, the government, media and PR, communities, also a very important part of it, co-working spaces, startup education, right? And startup education and startup support. This covers like programs, incubator programs, accelerator programs, advisory and things like that. So these 6 key players are responsible for, playing their part in ensuring that founders grow. Now, what we see is ecosystem players are setting up organizations as like just setting up a company. They're not realizing that the organization is directly impacting founders. That if that organization doesn't exist, founders will be deprived. If the organization exists, founders will benefit. So one is realizing that they are actually ecosystem players, like they have a role to play in the growth of founders in that city. 2 is ecosystem players realizing that they need to work together if they want to see growth at a faster pace. Ecosystem players need to realize that they have to work together. So it's one thing for you to do your own program in silo. It's another thing for you to say, when my founders graduate from my program, I'll hand them over to this investor network for them to receive funding. It's for us to realize that there's a lot of hand-holding we need to do within ourselves if we actually want to see growth. Because what will happen is one person is here digging a hole, another person is there digging a hole. We're unable to dig a mass. Well. Yes, we're not able to dig a well. So we need to work together, right? And then third layer is now realizing that we need to work together, now have a roadmap. Treat our region and our city as our own. I'm saying, what are we going to do for our own city that will make the difference for the founders, right? Building that roadmap together and then committing ourselves to it. Yes, we have our own personal organizational agenda, but we should have our own city's agenda so that 10 years from now, we'll start reaping the fruit. We will not see the fruit. It may take a while. It will actually take a while. I usually say that it takes about 10 years. A starting time frame is 10 years. If you can commit 10 years to that activity, you start seeing the fruits. You may be expressing bits and pieces, but you see the fruit in 10 years. So it's to say, okay, what's our 10-year agenda and what's our tithe? So we're going to be doing our organizational stuff, but there's something that we are giving putting back into the ecosystem as our tithe to the growth of the ecosystem. Because if that ecosystem grows, and obviously an ecosystem is a reflection of the founders in there. So if the founders grow, they build companies, we attract investment, more programs are launched, it indirectly affects you. So why not just take a portion of your time, resources, opportunities, and put it into the growth of the city's ecosystem?
Yeah, it's like I was watching a documentary about some of the desert in Egypt and Israel. So in Israel, that is now being converted to farms, and that brought okay, this is a startup ecosystem, and everybody just want to harvest from it and not plant trees. The tree you will not see the tree grow now. The tree will take like 5 years, 10 years to grow. But if we all harvest our trees, the only thing we can now do is to opt and leave and find a new forest to deforest, to harvest the trees from that forest. Now, at the end of the day, there's no tree there, and then we keep moving all over the place. So we need to plant.
Yes.
While we are benefiting from the existing trees, just so that in the future we have trees to harvest.
We need to take, just like the farmer, he would harvest, but he will leave some to plant back into the same soil for the next season. If we don't have that mindset as ecosystem players, we'll keep wondering why nothing is coming to our city.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
It's been a very, very, very interesting conversation. So I'm looking forward to having you again.
Yes, I'm looking forward to come back again.